Hi, everybody. Welcome to our live stream update on voting reform. I'm Katelynn. I'm the lead campaigner on electoral reform with Leadnow. And Rachel, introduce yourself.
Hi, folks. My name is Rachel, and I'm an organizer with Leadnow, and I work with our volunteers and support teams across the country.
So we are coming to you tonight live from Toronto in our office here, and we are going to chat with you a little bit tonight about what is happening on electoral reform and share some of our thoughts and ideas on how you can get involved in helping us keep this issue alive and on the table. We here at Leadnow do not think this issue is dead, and we are ready to get to work on holding the Liberals accountable for breaking their promise on this issue. So we're hopefully only going to take up about 45 minutes of your time, and we're going to be sharing a presentation for a lot of this call, so you can follow along on the PowerPoint. We're going to also have this video available afterwards. It'll be recorded right after this ends, and it'll be up on the same page that you're on right now, so you'll be able to go back and watch a recording of it later if you miss any information, or if you want to just remind yourselves or share it with friends and family who couldn't be here tonight. Yeah, just a couple of little housekeeping things. Because this is a PowerPoint presentation, there will be written words on the screen, and some of you, the resolution might be set low on your YouTube viewers, so if you need to adjust the resolution, there's a settings button that looks like a cog at the bottom of your video, and if you click that and hit video settings, you can move the quality of the video up so that you can read the words a little bit more clearly. So just wanted to say that if you're finding the words are really fuzzy and hard to read, just try adjusting those settings. So yeah, I see we've got 210 people on the call right now, so welcome. We're going to get started so that we can end on time. So we're going to share our screen now, and we're going to get right into the presentation. Just bear with us for a second here. Okay, great. Okay, so we already welcomed you and introduced ourselves. So we're going to start off a little bit with talking about the context of what just happened over the last week, a little bit of just background on who all the players are and what people are saying about this decision. Then we're going to talk about, Rachel's going to talk specifically about our plan to continue to hold the Liberals accountable for this broken promise, and how we're going to try to get electoral reform back on the table. And we are going to have a bunch of time to answer your questions and talk about next steps. So we should end no later than 6 p.m. Pacific, 9 p.m. Eastern, hopefully a bit sooner. So I just wanted to say one thing about questions. You're probably going to have questions through this presentation, and we want to make sure that we can get to as many of them as possible. So the way that we're going to manage that is, if you have any questions during the presentation, you can send them to questions@Leadnow.ca, or you can tweet them at us at Leadnow.ca. And we have someone who is sorting through all those questions and delivering them to us so that we can answer them at the end of the presentation. So feel free to shoot those off at any time while we're speaking. All right, I'm going to kick it over to Rachel now for the land acknowledgement.
Great. So usually at Leadnow events, we like to acknowledge the traditional territory that we are on. Here in Toronto, the First Nation Elders Circle put together this acknowledgement that I'm about to read. We are on the sacred land that has been a site of human activity for 15,000 years. This land is the territory of the Huron-Wendat and Petun First Nations, the Seneca, and most recently the Mississaugas of the Credit River. The territory was the subject of the Dish with One Spoon Wampum Belt Covenant, an agreement between the Iroquois Confederacy and Confederacy of the Ojibwe and allied nations to peaceably share and care for the resources around the Great Lakes. Today, the meeting place of Toronto is still the home to many Indigenous people from across Turtle Island, and we are grateful to have the opportunity to work in the community on this territory. So we know that there are callers from all across the country tonight, which is really exciting. So we just wanted to acknowledge the territory that we are on here in Toronto, but also to take a moment for folks to think about wherever you are in Canada or the world tonight, to think about which First Nations territory you are currently living on. And if you're not sure, this is a great thing to find out as we continue to understand our country's history of colonialism and the work we do to respect, protect, and support the fulfillment of the rights of Indigenous peoples and strive for just relationships between all people who live here.
Great, thanks, Rachel. Okay, so we are going to jump into it now. And like I said, for folks that have just joined us, I'm sure there's some people who are still hopping into the call. We're going through a presentation right now on the context of what just happened on electoral reform, and we're going to talk about how we can work together to put it back on the table. If you have any questions, you can email them to questions@Leadnow.ca or tweet them at Leadnow.ca, and we will be getting to those at the end of the presentation. Okay, so what just happened? So yeah, as we all know, as I'm sure all of us on this call are very aware, in 2015, the Liberals made a promise that they would make every vote count, and that 2015 would be the last federal election conducted under the first-past-the-post voting system. That was a promise that the Prime Minister doubled down on a number of times during the throne speech, all throughout the election, and multiple times throughout the first year in office. I believe somebody actually counted, and apparently he made the promise 1,813 times over the last year. So it wasn't just like a one-off thing. It was definitely a pretty big part of their platform in 2015. And last week, the Liberals announced that they were going to be dropping this commitment, and they were breaking their promise to change our voting system before the next election. So it was sort of an announcement that was felt like it came sort of out of the blue. We were not expecting that at this time. So we're feeling pretty dismayed by the decision, I think is putting it lightly, and are feeling pretty frustrated and angry at this government for breaking their words. So let's maybe walk a little bit through how we got to this point. So as a lot of you probably know, there was an all-party committee that was set up to consult Canadians and come up with a proposal on how we were going to reform our voting system. Once the Liberals won, came into power, they spent about 6 months kind of sitting on their hands on this issue, and then finally set up this all-party committee, which had voting members from all of the political parties across the spectrum, and no one had total control over the committee. And so that committee spent most of the summer and fall consulting Canadians and consulting experts, and 88% of those experts, as well as over 87% of people who came out to town halls and open mic sessions across the country, supported moving to a proportional representation system. So then in December of 2016, that committee released their report where they recommended proportional representation along with a national referendum. Almost right away, the government came out and sort of mocked the results of that recommendation, and all the Liberals on the committee dissented from that recommendation. So we already had a bit of an indication in December that this government was not happy with the recommendation for PR. And shortly after that, they launched another consultation process, the notorious mydemocracy.ca, which a lot of us saw was made fun of quite a bit in the media for being like a Cosmo quiz style consultation, where they didn't really get into the meat of electoral reform. They didn't ask people any specific questions about what voting systems they wanted, and as a result, did not really get anything specific out of that process. And so that kind of all leads us up to what happened last week. It was about almost exactly 2 months after the original committee report came out, and Trudeau blamed it on a lack of consensus between the political parties, and has also allegedly said that he is afraid of moving to proportional representation because he's bought into the myth that it would enable other alt-right ideologies to emerge. Okay, so yeah, the bottom line is that they're trying to change the channel as soon as possible. So they've done a calculation that they think this won't hurt them, and they're trying to distract us as much as possible from that. And we don't want to let them do that. So we have got a plan. So almost right away after this was announced, the Leadnow community jumped into action. So we've made, members made over 1,600 phone calls to the Prime Minister's office, which amounts to about 62 hours of phone calls. So there's some staff in the PMO who are a little unhappy with us right now. And we've sent over 46,000 emails in total to Justin Trudeau and the two ministers about this issue. 10,000 of those came in just the last week, and they were specifically about this decision to drop this promise. We've also done a lot of media interviews over the last week talking about how this was a cynical and self-interested move, and we've been working with the Every Voter Counts Alliance to craft a response as well. Yeah, so what's been interesting about this is that MPs some MPs have clearly been also disappointed by this decision and even uncomfortable with it. So there was one MP, Nathaniel Erskine-Smith from Toronto, who actually wrote an op-ed saying that he was sorry that the party broke his promise. We've also seen a couple other MPs write letters to their constituents apologizing, saying that they were themselves disappointed by this decision. And just admitting that they broke their word and that there may be political consequences for that. So it's clearly something that other MPs in the party were surprised by, and that they are concerned will hurt them in the future. And the last thing I guess to say on that is that the Minister Gould, who is new to this position, there was a cabinet shuffle in January, and Minister Karina Gould was placed in charge of this file. She's been out now defending this decision from the government and actually defending first past the post, which is quite a change from even what she herself had said several months ago in the House of Commons. And Minister Monsef, who was the previous Minister of Democratic Institutions, when she presented to the Committee on Electoral Reform, called it antiquated and spoke at length about how Canada deserves a better voting system. So this is clearly a pretty big about-face from their original position. And it's unclear as to how much the minister knew and how much the parliamentary secretary knew about this decision or when they knew. I think it's pretty clear, though, that this is a decision that came from the top. It came from the Prime Minister's office and from Prime Minister Trudeau. So that is who we are focusing on primarily. And yeah, I think that the media has given them a hard time on this appropriately. There's been a lot of talk of how this is a betrayal to voters who voted for them on this issue in 2015, how it could breed cynicism in particularly young voters, how this was just a very blatant broken promise. It was such a big part of their 2015 platform. But also a lot of people talking about how they don't know if this will actually impact Trudeau and that they think that people don't care about voting reform. Well, you know, we feel like this is actually bigger than just electoral reform. This is actually, we think, part of a bigger pattern that's starting to emerge about how this government is not living up to their election promises and to the image that they sold of themselves as being different and bringing about a different way of doing politics. And we think that altogether that could really hurt them in 2019, especially with young voters who came up for them in droves in 2015. We think that the reason they dropped this is probably because they didn't get the recommended system that they wanted, which was probably preferential ballot, and that this alt-right sort of excuse is a distraction, and it's sort of intended to make people think that proportional representation was dangerous, when in fact a lot of evidence suggests otherwise. So I'm gonna stop there. I'm gonna pitch over to Rachel now to talk about what we're gonna do about this situation.
Great, thanks, Kate. So what's next? We heard a lot about the outrage that happened last week. So Trudeau abandoned the critical promise around electoral reform, and people were outraged, and we really saw that with the response. There was phone calls to Trudeau. We signed petitions. We emailed our MPs. Lots of people took to social media, just really talking about how this was unacceptable and that this promise, it was completely abandoned. People were feeling betrayed, and that we really need to get it back on the table. And so what we're going to be talking about is what's next, and what can we do specifically this week to turn up the heat alongside with allies that we're working with to push the government to put electoral reform back on the table. So we want to bring ER back. And so the plan, our goal here is to get electoral reform back on the table. Trudeau thinks that he can abandon this promise and that perhaps it'll just wash over with the media cycle and go away. And we're here to tell them that no, we're really committed to making this happen, and we expect that from him. And so we are planning to target Trudeau, as Katelynn said. We really think this has been a top-down decision, but also MPs across the country. So we know that many MPs across the country support electoral reform. We know that many Liberal MPs support electoral reform. And we, as Katelynn mentioned, have already heard of different MPs talking about how they don't agree with this decision. And so we really want to target our MPs across the country, and as their constituents, really letting them know that we're angry about this and we don't think it's acceptable, and we really want electoral reform to be back in the discussion. And so the main tactic that we're looking at for this week, and this is going to be in a suite of tactics that we're going to be rolling out over the next few weeks, but tonight we're just going to be talking about primarily distributed MP office drop-ins, and then I'll also mention a letter to the editors. So what are distributed MP office drop-ins? It sounds really simple, and it is, but it's very powerful. So this is just a chance to go visit your MP, drop in, and letting them know how furious you are about this broken promise. It can be really challenging to get meetings with our MPs. If you ever tried to do that, it can be tough to figure out when they're in town, when they have space in their schedule. We're not going to put all our hopes on actually getting all those official meetings. We are just going to drop in. Their offices are open to us 9 to 5, usually Monday to Friday, and they're meant for spaces for constituents to come in and talk to the constituents, assistants, and the MPs if they are there. And so we want drop-ins to be happening, like flooding MP offices across the country. And this is not something that's just going to go away in a week. It's something that we're going to be continuously visiting and raising up over and over again, day after day. The hope is after we drop into our MP's office, we can also be writing letters to the editor. Again, we really want to make sure that this issue stays in the public narrative. This is not something that will die with the media cycle. It's something that we're going to be continuing to revive. And so by writing letters to the editors in our local communities and continuing this conversation in a public way will be a really effective way to make sure this doesn't just become something that sort of trickles off. And around MP office drop-ins, it's not just something that we're hoping that happens in Liberal ridings. We really see this as something that's strategic to happen in all ridings across the country. Of course, Liberal ridings are very important, but also MPs who are not in the Liberal Party, who are from all stripes, all backgrounds, need to know what their constituents think, what our priorities are, and to keep up the pressure to represent us and keep up that pressure themselves as elected representatives in the House of Commons. So why will this plan work? So again, this is just the beginning of what we're hoping to do to really put pressure on MPs. And we know that there's outrage across the country. So what we're trying to do is figure out a strategic way to channel this outrage so that we can do it in a collective and coordinated way. And channel this outrage about the broken promise from constituents to their MPs and show them that the people who got them elected are angry. And then we'll convince the Liberals to put electoral reform back on the table because they'll want to be reelected in 2019. So on a very basic level, getting reelected hinges a lot on obviously their performance, and a lot of people hinge their vote on the promises that we heard in the last lead up to the election. And so if we can really show that people are outraged, this is going to have a lot of impact on hopefully getting electoral reform actually back into the discussion. So how will this actually mechanically work? MP drop-ins, the first step is to sign up to drop in on your MP. And so there is a sign-up box. It should be on the page that you're currently looking at, where it asks for your name, your email, your postal code, and when you plan on going to your MP's office. If you're looking on your smartphone, it should be below the video window. And just, you can take a moment right now to fill out your information and think about when is a time, it can be approximate, it can be a day of the week, that you think that you can go in the next week to drop in on your MP's office. After you sign up, you drop in. You just go and you go and talk to, if your MP's there, great. If not, your constituent assistant. Let them know why you're upset that this promise was abandoned. And let us know that it happened. So take a photo. You can send it to photos@Leadnow.ca. If you are on Twitter, you can also tweet using the hashtag #BringERBack so that we can make these visits really visible to the public eye as well. Not only will our MPs see it, but also sometimes the media can see it. Sometimes it gets picked up on social media, and it's really a way to amplify what we're doing and make it visible. And then after your visit, someone from our team will give you a call to find out how it went. It's really great for us to hear how it went, for us to plan our future tactics, and to be able to give information to people who haven't gone yet. So here's some examples of folks going to see their MPs, and this is just to really highlight the importance of taking that photo. If you're able to meet with your MP, getting a photo, or even if you're just standing outside of their office and getting their sign in there, it's really, really important that we're documenting this and sharing this outrage, not only in the offices of our MPs, but also amplifying it on social media. And if you're able to, at a minimum, send us your photos at photos@Leadnow.ca, we'll make sure that we get that out there as well. We do know that MPs are in Ottawa throughout February, but we do understand that often they're back in their ridings primarily on Fridays. But if your MP is not in, again, speaking to the staff and actually sitting down, having a meeting with them, or leaving a message for them, your message will be heard. MPs care about what their constituents are saying, and when day after day folks are coming in with the same message, the people who are living in that riding, it actually is very powerful. We also have materials to help you. So again, if you haven't already signed up in the box below or beside your screen, once you do sign up, we will send you a toolkit in your inbox that will give you some talking points. We'll reiterate a lot of the stuff we've said tonight around going to visit your MP and talk about what the follow-up and next steps we'll look at.
Okay, so a lot of people have been asking us what else is going on with all of the other groups involved in the Every Voter Counts Alliance. And of course, we are talking to each other and working together to push back against this decision. One of the things that a lot of you know is happening this Saturday is there's a National Day of Action happening in a variety of cities across the country. I think most major cities are hosting something on Saturday. And they are actually things that are being organized at the grassroots level. They weren't initiated by Leadnow or Fair Vote. They're just a group of people that are really upset about this decision, which I think is really awesome. And they've got a list of where all those things are happening at this link here. So if you want to write that down, that you'll be able to see where things are going on. If you miss this link, don't worry, we're going to email it out after the webinar to anyone who RSVP'd. And again, this video will be posted right after we're done here, so you can go back and rewind to this slide again if you want to catch that URL. And then there's a couple other things that are also happening. The NDP have been pretty busy in the House of Commons lately, trying to give the government heck over this, for lack of a better word. And so they are proposing a motion that, if passed, would conclude that the Liberals misled Canadians on their commitment to voting reform. So it's an interesting one, and we're going to be watching that one pretty closely. The link there just takes you to an article that explains that initiative a little bit more. And then the other thing that's going on is there's an e-petition, which is now, I think, at actually over 86,000 signatures the last time I checked. And if it gets to 100,000 signatures, it actually triggers a debate in the House. And that e-petition is basically calling on Trudeau to affirm his commitment to voting reform. It actually was started back in November, I think, but it still stands today. It could be a great way to get Trudeau to answer for the broken promise in the House of Commons. So we're really close to having that be at 100,000 signatures, so please sign and share that. It's also posted on the Leadnow Facebook page if you want to check that out. And then what else we are doing, I know that we've been talking a lot at length about the MP meetings, but there's going to be more things coming up in the next little while. One of them is what we're calling the Knock Your Block initiative, which would basically provide you folks with petitions and flyers that you can use to go out and knock on the doors of your neighbors, or just drop flyers in their mailboxes talking about this issue and directing them to their MP to send them an email or make a phone call about voting reform, asking them to stand up and put it back on the table. We are also going to be doing some things that are more visible in the media. So we're going to be fundraising to do some ad buys in strategic areas. We could be flyer dropping in strategic ridings across the country. And we're just looking at a variety of ways to put more pressure on specific MPs who might be feeling uncomfortable with this decision. So basically stay tuned for some of that stuff. I think over the next 2 weeks in particular, we're going to be working really hard to make this something that the Liberals have to answer for.
So yeah, just as Kate mentioned, there's lots of other things happening within the movement. Our allies are doing a lot of great work. We also have plans to really escalate this and go beyond MP meetings. This is really a first step in what we're talking about tonight and sending you resources on, because we really want to get out there urgently, be in our MP's offices. And so just to recap, first step is actually signing up that you will go to an MP's office. So if you're, yes, I plan on going to my MP's office, take a moment right now, fill in your information on the box, and you will receive a toolkit. You will also receive a follow-up phone call afterwards so that we can hear from you and hear how it actually went. The second step after you sign up is actually going to see your MP, taking a photo, documenting your experience, sending it to us, and if you have Twitter, using the hashtag #BringERBack. Great, so we're going to take a moment now to do a Q&A. So I'm going to leave this up here for a second so folks can see it, and then I'm going to take away the screen share, and then you'll see Katelynn and I again. So if you have questions, you can email our inbox at questions@Leadnow.ca, or you can send out a tweet at Leadnow.ca. And we are collecting tons of questions right now, going through them. I'm seeing where we're having like some synergy in the questions, so where questions are coming up more than once. And those are the questions that we're gonna be looking at first, is where we're seeing some trends from folks after the presentation, because that's always helpful for us to understand where we might have missed something or need to explain something a little bit further. So Katelynn, I'll get you to figure out that question there, and I'm gonna do the screen share here.
Okay, I think we're back. Hello, it's our faces again. Okay, so we're going to jump into some of the questions. We've got one quick question from Stephen. He's asking what happens if he works 9 to 5 during weekdays, and he's already sent an email to his MP and to Trudeau, but works during the week, so can't maybe drop in. That's totally a great question. I think if you can make a phone call, that would be the next best thing. Give your MP a call. It could even be after business hours, so leaving them a voicemail, if you can't call during work hours, is totally a great thing to do. And again, they are counting things like phone calls and visits, and they're paying attention to those things. So if you're not able to go in person, that's another option. Do you want to take that?
We have a question. What if your MP is conservative at any point in going to their office? Yes, absolutely. So some Conservative MPs we have heard are definitely in favor of electoral reform. We know that Conservative MPs on the all-party committee were also part of coming up with the proposal around proportional representation and the referendum. And so absolutely, it's worth going to see MPs across the country. If all MPs are hearing from this, this is a really powerful story, including, partisan, all stripes.
Mm-hmm. So we're having a lot of folks mentioning, again, the February 11th National Day of Action. We did mention it a bit earlier in the presentation, but just want to reiterate that we're totally supportive of this National Day of Action, and we really want to encourage everyone to go if you can. We do have a link for all the events up on our Facebook page right now, and we will send the link with the full list of events out after this webinar to everyone who RSVP'd. So we're definitely doing our best to get the word out about that.
We have a question from Kate. If we have dropped in once, should we do it again? And what's the line that we should use when we drop in? Absolutely, I think drop in again. I think keep dropping in until, I really think that's something that you can continuously do. Like if you're going like once a week even, that's a very powerful thing. I think that going in as a steady stream, like not necessarily coordinating all of your people in your community to go at once, but actually like go in when you can, go in a steady stream of different days of the week at different times. And in terms of what the line should be, we are sending out a toolkit that has a lot of different information that you can read through before you go. But on a very basic level, the line is how you feel about this betrayal. And what we're calling for is putting electoral reform back on the table. So we're saying bring ER back. We will not accept and think it's unacceptable that this critical election promise has been completely abandoned. And so our just primary call right now is bring it back into the discussion and bring it back on the table.
Great. So we have another question about from Joanne, how do we ensure letters to the editor are published, and how do we know if any will be published if they get flooded with letters? Wouldn't it be better to send letters straight to MPs? So yeah, it's absolutely great to send letters right to MPs, but it's even better if you can publish something that a lot of different people can read. Of course, there's no guarantee that anything that you write will be published. We do have some resources in that toolkit with talking points that you can use to help develop your letter or your editorial, if that's what you wanted to write. And I recommend just trying to put a personal spin on it and putting a different spin on it if you can, to make it a bit more unique, to make it something that papers would be interested in publishing. I mean, it doesn't have to be anything very groundbreaking, but I think that a lot of people read their local newspapers, and sometimes even more than the national news. So I think that it's a really important way of reaching people who maybe haven't been following this issue as much as we have. So I would definitely encourage you to try, and if you can't get it published, just put it up on Facebook and share it with your friends and family that way.
So we're getting another question. I think I'm hearing from folks here, just seeing through the questions, that people have done all the things. They're outraged, they've done the calls, they've sent the emails, they've visited their MPs. And so, yeah, we want to keep visiting MPs. And if you have, friends or family or folks that live in the riding who you think just need someone to ask them and they would also go, maybe they're outraged but aren't on this call tonight or don't know that that's part of the strategy, that could be a way that you could be including folks in your community. But also just to reiterate that we're really hoping to jump on this tactic and this idea right now, and that we're going to be sending out to everyone who's on the call tonight more tactics that we're rolling out in the next week to continue this, so that it will go beyond MP meetings. So if you've done it already and you feel like you'd like to go again, or encourage folks in your community or go with them, and then really stay tuned around what we're going to be continuing to do to target MPs.
Yeah, I would just underline that. I think if you are a person that's already done a lot of things related to this, the next best valuable thing that you can do is find 5 more people and get them to do it as well. So we need to really broaden this beyond just our community of people. We need to make sure that this is something that goes far and wide. So if that's how you spend your next week, that's really, really important. I think there was a question about how proportional representation works. Sorry, we're just having a little computer scrolling issue.
Problem on the questions here.
So I have a couple people asking about specifically how PR would work on a ballot, and I'm not going to go too in depth into that. If you go to votebetter.ca, there's a whole bunch of resources that explain different types of proportional representation. I think the bottom line is that what it would do is mean that the amount of votes that a party receives, the popular vote that a party receives, would be roughly the same as the number of seats that they get in the House. So it's about making it fair. There's a lot of different ways to do that. And actually, we were preparing to bring some specific system suggestions to this government before they announced this. Decision. So it's a little bit disappointing, because we were getting to that point of really wanting to hone in on what specific type of PR we should do. And it's disappointing that we didn't get the opportunity to have that conversation with this government. So yeah, votebetter.ca.
Yeah, votebetter.ca is a great resource. And I think, like Kate said, we were hoping to get to that point. And from last week, we're 2 steps back. And so that's why our ask right now is let's even just get it back on the table and back in discussion. And then once we can get that win, the next step is going to be exactly what people are talking about, is what does this actually look like? What does this actually mean in our ridings to be voting in a proportional system? But for now, we're really back to that. We actually need this promise to be reconsidered and recommitted to.
So there's a couple questions here that are sort of similar. So one is about how we really care about ending first past the post. This came in from Twitter, from Taylor. He's saying that he really cares, or she really cares about ending first past the post, but how many other Canadians realize how important this is? Do we have stats that show that this is a big enough issue for people to get involved with? I think that it's the way that I've been thinking about this, and I think the way that we should be thinking about this, is that it's about more than just electoral reform. I think that there's a lot of different issues that different communities sometimes care about, and what we've seen over the last couple of months is the Trudeau government letting people down on a variety of different issues, not just electoral reform. So this, I think, for me, is a bit of the straw that broke the camel's back. It's indicative of a broader trend of them not living up to their promise to be different. And so I think that that's kind of what we need to be drawing attention to. I think that we can also think about electoral reform as really foundational to solving a lot of the other problems that people care about. So yeah, I think that it's a thing that people often think is very niche, but it's actually very important. And a lot of people care about it when you engage them on it through a short conversation. So yeah, I think it's going to come back to haunt them in 2019 for sure.
We have a question from Nathaniel about which type of proportional representation we're supporting. So Leadnow is a member-driven organization. We consistently are surveying our membership, which is 500,000 people across the country, around what type of campaigns we should be running and where we should be putting our energy. And it is through these conversations we've had with supporters that proportional representation very clearly was a priority. But we didn't get specific on which type of proportional system. We've been really pushing proportionality as an umbrella and as having more as Katelynn was saying, like votes to seats. So having that be actually proportional, so as a value. And this is something that we've been wanting to push for and get more specific on. But as Katelynn said, from what we've seen last week, we're back at the just getting it on the table conversation, and that we'll be working with the Leadnow community if we can push this further down to look at what a more specific system would look like.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So there's another question from Barbara and a similar one from Gloria. Barbara was asking, what is Trudeau basing his statement that there's no consensus on voting reform on when there seems to be a clear consensus for PR? And then second related question about whether we can explain the government's reasoning for dropping this promise. Yeah, so we kind of talked about this a little bit earlier in the presentation. Yeah, we don't agree with the government's assertion that there is no consensus on this issue. It was pretty clear to us from the consultations that we participated in and our community, many of you participated in over the summer and the fall, that it was really a discussion between the status quo and proportional representation. And, you know, I think most people were not even particularly, didn't feel particularly passionate about one type of PR over another. People wanted local representation of some sort, and that was a big thing that we heard. But aside from that, people were pretty open to what kind of PR we would get. So yeah, the experts were overwhelmingly in favor of PR. So this is a bit of a misrepresentation of what actually happened. And it seems to me like, you know, the government didn't try to come to a consensus. It seems like there was a lot of discussion happening between the opposition parties, and the government wasn't willing to come to the table. So I don't think you can blame, you know, Canadians and blame the other parties for not coming to a consensus when there was no attempt to forge that consensus. What was the other part of that question? It was about why they did this. Yeah, I think it was probably because they didn't get the system that they were hoping to get out of this process, and it was becoming embarrassing for them, so they decided to drop it. So that's unfortunate because seems like business as usual, politics as usual, which is disappointing. So that's why part of the reason I think why we are so disappointed in this decision.
So a couple of questions around allied events. One is a question if we're working with Fair Vote. Absolutely, Fair Vote has been very strong and vocal on this issue for many, many years, and we've been working closely with them. They're part of the Every Voter Counts Alliance, and we are in frequent communication with them, both on a local and national level. And in terms of the rallies this weekend, so question around action items for the rallies this weekend. We have a link on our Facebook page that we'll send out as well after this webinar around the different actions happening across the country. And there's different folks hosting all of them across the country, so it really depends on where you are. But certainly there's ways to get involved and contact the people who are organizing a local rally in your community to find out what help they need and how you can potentially participate or even help run it. So we will definitely get that link out. I know the more actions that we can have across the country, the louder it will be. So really great to hear that folks are interested in that.
What's next? There's a lot of folks with some really great ideas that are coming in about different things that we can do. So I just want to let you know, if we don't respond on this call specifically to your ideas, we are reading them and are taking them into consideration for sure. We're going to be having a lot more conversations about what's next. So this is really helpful. So if you do have exciting, interesting ideas, definitely go ahead and send them to us.
Yeah, and maybe we'll just, I can read a couple of comments here that we're getting. So they're not questions, but just ideas that folks have. This came from Patrick. I don't think the planned actions match the outrage I feel at this betrayal. This is a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity for electoral fairness that is being frittered away. I've personally pledged to boycott voting for the federal liberals until some form of proportional representation is in place. I suggest writing such a boycott letter and bringing it to MPs' offices. So lots of these kind of ideas are coming in.
Yeah. Yeah, there's a lot of questions coming in here, so we're just sort of reading through them. So we'll do a couple more minutes of questions. And again, if we don't get a chance to get to all your questions, we will make sure you send them to questions@Leadnow.ca, and we'll go through some of those questions over the next couple of days and respond to them by email.
Sorry, that's just really important. If you don't get responded to, but you have sent your question in, you will get an email response from Katelynn or I or someone on the Leadnow team.
Yeah. Okay, so there's a question here about strategic voting in the next election and whether Leadnow has abandoned a strategic voting campaign for the next election. So I think that it touches on something that is relevant to this conversation, which is that a lot of people did vote strategically for the Liberals in the last election because of their commitment to voting reform. As we know, all the opposition parties had voting reforms on their platform, and the Liberals were among them. So yeah, we are all disappointed that they broke this promise, feeling pretty let down. And it's really too early to say, I think, what our election strategy is going to be. But I think that it's clear that this betrayal is going to play a big role in our strategizing around the next election. And I think that it's also something that we are going to pitch to all of you, to the Leadnow community, to help develop kind of a strategy for 2019 in light of this news. I mean, I think that it's too early to say for sure that we won't have PR by 2019. There's still time to get it through, and that's the thing that I do want to underline, that the clock hasn't totally run out, and we do still have time if we were able to get this back on the table to get it put through and have it become legislation before the next election. But it is definitely sending a pretty big message to progressive voters and to voters who care about this issue. So it's going to be something that definitely 100% gets taken into account for 2019. So we're interested to hear your thoughts on approaching the next election.
I'm going to share my screen one more time. All right, so just reiterating some next steps that came after this. Again, reminder, if you sent in a question and it was not answered, particularly to the questions@Leadnow.ca inbox, we will get to all those questions and be responding to you if you didn't get an answer today by email. Another plug to sign up and drop in on your MP. Even if you're not totally sure when you can do it, adding your name to the box either on the right or below of your screen will give us an indication of who's interested and able to do this. So you'll receive your toolkit, you'll receive a phone call from a volunteer to find out how it went afterwards. And then stay tuned. This is really step one, week one. We are going to be sending out another toolkit with more tactics coming up, things that we can do across the country in a coordinated effort, because we know when we do this together, we are really stronger and our voice is really louder, and MPs across the country hearing the same message is really powerful. So please let us know if you can go to an MP meeting. We'll be in touch, and keep sharing the website, votebetter.ca. It's a great place to send a letter directly to Trudeau, but also to get resources on different voting systems, and we are also updating that with different blogs around where we are at with our strategy. So keep that bookmarked.
Great. Okay, well, I think we're gonna wrap up. There were a couple questions we didn't get to on Twitter. We'll try to respond to those later tonight or tomorrow. But thank you all so much for coming. I just wanted to say that I think there's about 300 people watching this webinar right now, which is pretty incredible. There's a lot of people that care about this issue, and we're not alone in being outraged about this. I think that we are, we are definitely building a movement here, and sometimes these things take a little bit longer and are a little bit harder than we thought they were going to be. But I think that it's clear that there's people across this country that, are ready to keep holding this government accountable and pushing for voting reform. I think I've said a number of times it's the right time for this idea. So I think that what we're doing is what we should be doing, which is holding them accountable. So we're just gonna stop screen sharing again and say goodbye to everybody. Yeah, well, thank you all so much for coming. Do you want to say anything, Rachel?
Yeah, we will definitely be in touch. This won't be the first webinar or the first time you'll be hearing from us. Thanks for tuning in. It's really amazing to have folks from coast to coast to coast on this call about an issue we all really care about, and we'll keep organizing and working together.
Yeah, thanks everybody.
See you out there.